So
Okay.
it's very nice to have you here on the podcast, and to introduce everybody. Welcome to the AUIS podcast, Kim Malone Scott. To this beautiful autumn evening, we're here today. Recording this episode with you. Specifically, we're going to be going over questions that are regarding leadership, your skills, your background, and even your book. I mean, your books, Radical
Great.
Candor, which you're most known by, and
Yes.
obviously your company and everything else. So, for people who don't know, Kim Malone Scott is a CEO coach, author of Radical Candor: How to Become a Kick A-word boss, and co-founder of a company with the same name, Radical Candor, which helps leadership skills, which helps relationships in the workplace, and really focus on all those sorts of things that are integral to a healthy workplace experience. As well as that, she has had work experience in Apple University, coaching people to go into become employees at Apple, and at the same time leading the online sales and operations for AdSense, YouTube, DoubleClick, working for Google. And so honestly, so much that anybody who'd see you on LinkedIn will probably block you out of fear of competition. So it's really a lot to mention. That's why I feel like, for this sort of program, you're probably the best person to have on here.
Oh,
But
well,
I
thank
love you.
you.
Yeah, and I'd love you to introduce yourself as well in your own words.
Sure. So my name is Kim Scott, and what I really care about is getting great work done and building great relationships. That's what I really care about, and that's what my books are about, and what uh, my company is all about. So it's the key part is really an important part of radical candor.
Right. And, you have a really diverse portfolio. What can you tell us about the difference in management and your management experience and all of these different, work experiences that you've had? Where have you seen it be easier? Where have you seen it become more difficult?
Yeah. It's really interesting. The core job of and it's really, I think about it in terms of organizing collaboration rather than managing. It's not about power, it's relationships that drive you forward. And the core aspects of that are the same in every country where I've ever worked and in every industry where I've ever worked. So the core aspects of, if I'm, for example, one of the things I really love to do is rewild various land. Usually I'm doing that in California, but working with the people who are rewilding the land is not so different from working with executives at Google, is not so different. I've, from working with people who are leading teams in warehouses. It's the core aspects that I'm talking about. And it's, by the way, when I was working at Google, I was managing teams in 13 different countries at the same time, all over the world. And radical candor sounds different culture to culture, but it's universally human. It's about love and truth at the same time, and those are universal human values: love and truth. But the way that we express love and truth is gonna vary from culture to culture. And so the important thing I think to keep in mind is that radical candor gets measured not at the speaker's mouth, but at the listener's ear. It's got to be a two-way conversation, and you've got to adjust for the person who you're talking to.
Right. And you did talk about, how the it's not actually about managing, it's mostly about, coordinating effort or cooperating, making cooperations.
Yes.
And when you look at management like that and, you see that sense of leadership, when you look at different workplaces, like how you said, 13 different countries, does leadership ever change through site or occupation, or do you see it as, one dynamic that's, constant to all of them?
Here's my framework for what leadership is. Now, this is not to say this is the way it really is in most places. So this is an idealized version of it. And heaven knows the world is not ideal right now. But it's useful to have an ideal. So at the center, if you imagine leadership as a series of concentric circles, you are at the center of your concentric circle. So there's you, and it's really important. If you imagine this like a wheel, with a series of wheels, what happens when a wheel is out of alignment? When the center of the wheel is misaligned, the wheel cannot spin fast. So that's why it's the first thing you need to do if you want to become a leader is to make sure that you're doing what you need to do to stay centered, that you are aware of your own values, what motivates you, and that you're living your life in accordance with your own values, and that you're doing the things like, for example, I need to get a lot of sleep, and I need to exercise every day, and I need to have dinner with my family, with people I love. And if I can do those three things, no matter how hard life gets, I can stay centered. But if I don't do the three things, even if my life is pretty easy, I start to feel a little off kilter, shall we say. So you're at the center. Then the next concentric circle is your relationships. I believe that telling people what to do doesn't work. And so the most important thing that a leader can do is to build good relationships with each of their direct reports. And so when I get to the next concentric circle, the third concentric circle, it's about your responsibilities, what you actually do. And when I describe your responsibilities, you'll begin to understand you can't possibly fulfill your responsibilities unless you have good relationships with the people who work for you. And this is different from a friendship. It's not a friendship. It better not be a romance. And it's, except in a family business, it's not a family relationship, but it's still a very human relationship. So in the concentric circle that you're all waiting for, here's the actual job. Here are the responsibilities. You need to create a culture of what I call in the book guidance, but what most people call feedback. So you need to be able to tell people when they're doing great work and when they're doing bad work, like when they're going in the right direction and when they're going in the wrong direction. So that's important. And more importantly, you need to be able to hear it from them, because when you're a leader, there's one of you and there's a lot of other people, and they all have deeper knowledge than you do. And if you're not listening to them, there's no point in building a team.
Well, if I
So,
could stop you just right there,
mhm.
when you talk about personal relationship, how you have to create a relationship with the people that you're
Yeah.
working with, how do you balance that out when maybe sometimes getting to know somebody can involve some personal things that may be unprofessional? How do we balance creating a relationship with
Yes.
someone with professionalism in the workplace?
Yeah, yeah. It's a really important question. And I think that if, as I said before, radical candor is about love and truth at the same time. So I love a good 2x2 framework. I think a 2x2 framework will solve all of life's hardest problems. So I'm going to describe the relationship between a boss and their employee in terms of care personally. Imagine a vertical line, care personally, and imagine a horizontal line is challenge directly. So you have to care and challenge at the same time. And the caring personally part of radical candor is, I've worked with a lot of different kinds of leaders, and I'm sure they're out there, but I've never met anyone who said, oh, I don't care about other people, so I'm going to be a great leader. That's not what usually moves us in the wrong direction. I think part of the problem comes when we're young. We're 18, 19, 20 years old. We're right at that moment in our lives when our egos are maximally fragile and our personas are beginning to solidify. And right at that moment, someone comes along and they say, be professional. And this is a very dangerous moment in your life, because it's easy. I know I made this mistake when I was young, to translate that to mean, leave your emotions, leave who you really are, leave your humanity, leave everything that's best and most real about you at home, and show up at work like some kind of robot. And you can't possibly care personally if you're showing up at work like some kind of robot. So caring personally does not mean ignoring other people's boundaries. If somebody doesn't want to talk about a personal issue, it's not your job to make them, right? You have to let them. Respecting boundaries is part of caring personally. But it does mean you need to notice their humanity in the moment. If you see someone, if you notice that someone is making a mistake, for example, and they're upset, they kind of know they're making a mistake. You want to make sure that you show this person that you care about them and that you're going to help them fix that mistake. It's not about expressing dominance. It's about optimizing for collaboration, not coercion, which I think is not often, especially right now in the United States. I feel like we're going through maybe a totalitarian geist in our country. It's very worrisome, but I really believe in the I mean, in the short term, of course, command and control kind of management can work. But in the long term, I'm a firm believer that that when you optimize for collaboration, you're going to get better results, because I believe that humanity's superpower is that kind of collaboration.
And actually, on
So
that,
that's,
on that,
yeah.
yeah, on that point too, when you do mention, the current state that you're like America's going through politically, and how really the entire world is not in the best place.
No,
The
to put it
stress on
mildly.
yeah, the stress on good institutions that can last through these changes, it's a
Hmm.
very, very important, thing to go through. And really, when an employer, goes through a time of crisis, I want to know how you deal with that. How would you deal with, for example, you're leading a team and now a time of crisis is coming through? Like, we could even mention the, COVID-19 pandemic. We
Yes.
could mention all the other things that were going on, during maybe the house, market crash in 2008, all the other tough situations that not only put employers but employees at risk. How would a good leader deal with a sort of situation
Yes.
like
Yeah.
that? And if you could speak from your experience.
Sure. Yeah. How do you show people that you care personally in a time of crisis? It's because this is when leadership really matters. I think one of the things that is tempting to do in a time of crisis is to let everyone off the hook and just say, oh, things are so terrible. Like we don't really, but the fact of the matter is, in a time of crisis, work is a great solace. If there's some small corner of the world that you're in where you can do something that matters, whatever it is that your company does, it is really important that you continue to do that work. And that you show people around you that you care, that you show a little vulnerability. And for example, when my very first management experience took place in Moscow. I was living in what was then the Soviet Union, so this was a long time ago. And actually, the Soviet Union had just collapsed, and so now it's Russia. And this is 1992, and I had to hire these diamond cutters. And I thought it was going to be easy because the dollar was strong, the ruble had collapsed. And I went to talk to these guys, and I was offering them a salary that was 5 times higher than what they were currently getting. And I thought, of course, they'll take the job. And they didn't take the job right away. They wanted to have a picnic. And I was like, well, okay, I can have a picnic too. So we're sitting in the outskirts of Moscow drinking vodka, and all of a sudden I realized that what they really wanted was to know that if things went sideways in Russia, that if things collapsed, which they had already done a couple of times, and there was like very little food in the city at this point, they wanted to know that they would have a boss who would give a damn, who would care about them, who would figure out how to get them and their families out. And as you can imagine, given everything that's happening, I've been thinking a lot about those men and their families these days. And that was the moment actually that I realized that management really matters, that and that it's in fact interesting, that it hooks into the things that I care the most about, which are creating an environment where everybody can be productive and get work together, can get work done together, and also where they really care about each other. And I think it's easy to imagine that that kind of caring and that kind of productivity are antithetical to one another. But I actually believe they're very much aligned, because the thing that unleashes people's ability to do the best work of their lives are the relationships that they form.
Right.
And also the freedom that they have. I think innovation flourishes in freedom. Also, when I was in Russia in those early days, I was working with a number of physicists. And one night, one guy clutched his head and he said, "Ah, my head, my head." I said, "What is wrong?" I thought he was having like a migraine headache. And he said, "I've been forced for so long to pretend to believe things that I don't actually believe, that it gets in the way of my ability to understand physics, like the physical laws of nature." And I really understood where he was coming from. So I think that those are some early examples in my career where I realized that the job of a manager is to create a particular environment where people can do great work and they can get along, they can care about each other, and you can care about them.
And
And
so,
even if the
yeah, yeah,
world around you is not like that, you can create that little corner of the world. Sorry, I
yeah, totally.
interrupted you.
No, no, sorry, my bad. But like, and so what I get from what you're saying is that when it comes to leadership approach, you do tend to take the hands-on approach being with your employees, but when do you think it's best to, pull back and let the cooperation go through?
Yeah, it's a really important question. So if we go back to the image I was drawing of, you've got to create this culture of feedback, that's going to require some one-on-one time with each of your employees,
Right.
soliciting feedback, and then giving it should be in the moment. But your next responsibility is to build a great team and to push decisions into the facts, rather than you grab all the decisions. And so the question of when you intervene and when you let go is a really important one. And one of the things that I talk about in Radical Candor is to understand the difference between being a thought partner, a real collaborator with each of your team members, and and that's what you want. You don't want to be a micromanager, obviously, but you also don't want to be an absentee manager. When I was coaching Dick Costello, who was the CEO of Twitter, and we were talking about some people on his team wanted more time with him. And he said, that it was really important to spend that time with them. He said, there are some people who think, my only job as a manager is to hire great people and then get out of their way. And he said that's not a great way actually to create a good relationship. He said, imagine if I told my wife, "Oh, I'm not going to show up at home for dinner tonight because I don't want to micromanage you." I said that would not be a good way to build a marriage. Same thing with your employees. You need to spend, I think, an hour a week. You don't need to spend 40 hours a week with them, but you need to have some one-on-one time with them.
Right.
And the other thing about, if as you think about the difference between thought partner, absentee manager, and micromanager, that you want to keep in mind is that there are going to be some people on your team who want more of you, and there are going to be other people on your team who want less of you. And
Right.
so what feels like micromanagement for one person actually may feel like absentee management for another. So part of it is asking your team every week, where did I get involved that you wish I hadn't? And where did I fail to get involved that you wish I had?
Right. And you talked about the hiring process too. What do you feel like is because traditionally you especially in starting positions, you'd hire maybe fresh graduates or younger people. What are the most common mistakes that you see, not the young hirees do, but the ones that get into leadership positions?
Yes. I think hands down, the most common mistake that new managers make is that it's tempting. Like I've made this mistake too, is that they think they know more than everybody else around them and they become arrogant. Actually, power corrupts. A little bit of power absolute power corrupts, but even a little bit of power corrupts.
Right.
And so I'll share a mistake that I made when I first, do we have another minute? Sorry, I'm giving you long-winded answers. I'm going to solicit some feedback here from you. I'm giving you long-winded answers to my questions.
Actually, if you could give a like kind of briefer responses, it would be
Okay.
better. Yes.
Slightly short. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, we
Thank you for
have
being, so
maybe.
I'm not going to tell you a long story, but sure, I'll tell you the short version of the story. But
Right.
I interrupted you.
Oh
This
no,
is
no, totally. No, thank you. That's really the feedback is because, we just have a couple of questions to get through, but like we're also trying to be, kind towards your time.
Okay, great. So the short version of the short answer is that you want to make sure that you are not telling people what to do, that you're listening to them, that you're giving them an opportunity to clarify their ideas, that you're creating a culture of debate, that you're not grabbing the decisions, that you're encouraging other people on your team to make the decisions and helping them persuade others that those decisions are right. And then you can execute on a new idea. And I think the single biggest problem that new managers make is they think, I know what to do, and I'm going to just tell everybody to do it. And that's not
Right,
going to work.
right.
You got to
And
go through what I call the get stuff done wheel.
definitely. And this is a bit of a more, personal question, but we'd really love that sort of perspective from someone as experienced as you. If you could go back to, your 20s, starting
Mm-hmm.
out with your leadership experiences, and you could talk to yourself and really get yourself to either do something and, keep doing something and stop doing one thing, what would you tell yourself to do?
I would tell myself, one, to solicit feedback from my team, to ask, the question I like to ask is, what could I do or stop doing that would make it easier to work with me? I should have been asking that question at the end of every one-on-one meeting that I had with each of my employees. And then I should have rewarded the candor when I got it. So you got to make sure as a leader that you really are listening to what the people around you think about what you're doing. Because the moment you become a leader, people stop telling you what they really think. Flattery will come at you like a thick and dangerous fog. And the only way you won't run aground on the rocks is if you ask people what they really think, and
Right.
then reward them when they actually tell you.
Yeah, which
So
is a point
remember,
you stress a lot in your book as well.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And so,
you're not as good as you feel when you become a new manager.
right. And so, really, because we did mention, your earlier experiences in the workplace, especially, earlier leadership experiences.
Hmm.
When was a time in the workplace where you felt angry or maybe even emotional and, you felt like you had had to hold back and you did hold back? And when could you not hold back? When were some situations that still regret to this day when it comes to dealing with anger or emotion in the workplace?
Yeah, there was one moment when it was very stressful. I had started this software company, and then we had launched to Wall Street in 2001, and a lot of our customers actually were resident in the World Trade Towers. And then after 9/11 happened, it was we weren't going to get any more fun. Everything was shutting down, and a lot of our customers were obviously they were just gone, and so it was a stressful time. And I was very someone close to me had died. I was upset
Rest in
and
peace.
really sad, and and the sales leader asked me to come in and talk to the team and buck them up and encourage it, and I went in and I started to talk and I just burst into tears. So at that point I wasn't angry, I was sad. And actually bursting into tears was the best thing I could have done for the team, because that was what we needed to do. We needed to cry. We needed, we were all of us had been we were in New York City. We were all affected by what had happened. And I think that was an example and I felt at the time ashamed, like I had done something wrong to burst into tears. But I think actually in retrospect, that was the right thing to do. The wrong thing to do happened a few weeks later, actually a couple of months later, where I was still stressed, but we were starting to rebuild the business. And somebody on the team, I wanted, a friend of mine had lost his office, and I was just like, just let him work in our office. We had some extra space. And the guy who led our IT said, I'm not going to let some stranger from the street on our network. He was just kind of he was being protective of the network, which was his job. But on the other hand, I felt like he wasn't. And I was so angry. Like, I almost hit him. Like my fist was coming up to I got together with him recently, and he remembered the same incident. He was like, I think she's going to hit me, but she's so small, it won't hurt. And then he said he remembered thinking, she's really mad, it might actually hurt. But anyway, I managed to regain my composure and not hit my IT guy. But I felt that was, I think, I was failing to get the exercise that I needed and the sleep. My wheel was no longer centered, that I would almost hit someone who worked for me. And that was a sign, actually. What I did after that happened was my friend, who I was allowing to use our office, said, you're not okay, Kim. Like, and he took me to learn how to meditate, so that was another one of those moments in my career when I realized I needed to learn how to manage my own emotions. Right. Like, that was one of the things that I owed to my team. And I think a mistake that leaders sometimes make is they impose their own stuff, emotional, psychological stuff. They impose it on others rather than, if you can't manage yourself, you can't manage other people. So
I think that's beautifully put.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you so much, Kim. It was amazing to have you, really, and I'm glad we got through everything. And I'm really glad we could have someone of your, magnitude to actually, help us teach something today. So we thank you a lot, and it's been a blast having you on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I loved being with you on the podcast, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Definitely. Thank you so much.